They told her she was lucky to even be in the room. They told her she was a nobody, a placeholder, a simple girl from the Midwest who trapped a Sterling into marriage. When Marcus Sterling slid the divorce papers across the mahogany table, he expected tears. He expected begging. He expected a scene. But Eleanor didn't cry. She didn't scream. She picked up the pen, signed her name with a steady hand, and walked out of the Sterling mansion with nothing but a carry-on bag. Marcus thought he had won. He thought he was finally free to marry the socialite of his dreams. He had no idea that in 48 hours, the roar of a Gulfstream GS-850 would interrupt his engagement party, and the woman stepping off that jet would bring his entire empire to its knees. This is the story of the quiet divorce that shook the world. The air in the conference room on the 42nd floor of the Sterling Tower was cold enough to preserve meat. It was designed that way. It was a psychological tactic Marcus Sterling used on his competitors, and today he was using it on his wife of 5 years, Elena. Elena sat on one side of the massive, custom-built table. She wore a beige cashmere sweater that had seen better days and simple black slacks. She looked small against the backdrop of the Manhattan skyline, grey and imposing through the floor-to-ceiling glass. Opposite her sat the tribunal. Marcus Sterling, looking impeccably sharp in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, refused to make eye contact. He was busy checking the time on his Patek Philippe, clearly annoyed that this formality was taking more than 10 minutes. Next to him sat his mother, Beatrice Sterling, a woman whose face was pulled so tight by plastic surgery that her smile looked more like a snarl. And of course, their lead counsel, Arthur Penhaligon, a man who charged $2,000 an hour to destroy lives. "Let's review the terms one final time, Mrs. Sterling," Arthur said, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. "You act as the petitioner. You cite irreconcilable differences. You waive all rights to the Sterling Family Trust. You waive spousal support. You vacate the Hamptons estate and the Upper East Side penthouse immediately. In exchange, Mr. Sterling agrees to pay a one-time settlement of $50,000. Arthur paused, waiting for the fight. $50,000 for 5 years of marriage to a man worth nearly $400 million was an insult. It wasn't even enough to rent a studio apartment in the city for a year. It was Beatrice's idea, of course. She wanted to see Elena crawl. Beatrice leaned forward, her diamonds clicking against the table. "It's a generous offer, Elena," she said, her voice like grinding glass. "Considering you brought absolutely nothing into this marriage, no connections, no dowry, no pedigree. You were a waitress when Marcus found you. We're paying you to leave quietly. Don't get greedy." Marcus finally looked up. His eyes were tired, but hard. "Just sign it, Elle. Don't make this difficult. Chloe is waiting for me. We have the engagement photos scheduled for 4 o'clock. Chloe Vanderhoven, the daughter of a shipping magnate. Blonde, bubbly, and rich. Everything Beatrice wanted in a daughter-in-law. Marcus had been seeing her for 6 months. He hadn't been subtle about it, leaving receipts from the Plaza Hotel and Cartier in his jacket pockets for Elena to find. Elena looked at the papers. The text blurred slightly, but not from tears. She was thinking about the last 5 years. She remembered the nights Marcus came home crying because the board was going to oust him. She remembered rewriting his pitch decks for the Asian markets because he didn't understand the cultural nuances. She remembered soothing Beatrice's ego when the tabloids mocked her gala dress. She had been the invisible glue holding the Sterling dynamism together, and they thought she was just a waitress. "I have one condition," Elena said softly. Her voice was steady, surprising Arthur. Beatrice scoffed. "Here it comes. She wants the house. She wants $1 million. "No," Elena said. She reached into her purse. Not a Birkin, just a simple leather tote, and pulled out a Mont Blanc pen. It was the only expensive thing she owned, a gift from her late father. "I don't want the 50,000. The room went silent. The hum of the air conditioning seemed to get louder. "Excuse me?" Marcus frowned. "I don't want the money," Elena repeated. "I want a clean break. I want my name removed from all Sterling Enterprises documentation, including the silent partner clauses in the charitable trust. And I want the non-disclosure agreement regarding my background to be mutual. If I can't talk about you, you can't talk about me." Arthur narrowed his eyes. He smelled a trap, but he couldn't see it. A mutual NDA was standard. Refusing the money was insanity. "You're refusing the settlement?" Arthur asked, pen hovering. "I don't need your money, Marcus," Elena said, looking directly at her husband. "I just want out." Beatrice laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "She's trying to play the martyr, Marcus. Let her. It saves us 50 grand. Write it up, Arthur." "Elle, you have nowhere to go," Marcus said, a flicker of pity crossing his face. "You don't have a degree. You haven't worked in 5 years. Take the money." "I'll be fine," Elena said. Arthur quickly scribbled the amendments. He pushed the document toward her. Elena didn't hesitate. She didn't look at the view. She didn't look at the man she had once loved enough to leave her own world behind. She signed her name, Elena Verfat. She didn't write Sterling. The divorce papers required her legal name, and technically she was still a Sterling, but her signature was an unreadable, aristocratic scrawl she hadn't used in half a decade. She capped her pen and stood up. "You have 24 hours to vacate the penthouse," Beatrice snapped. "My bag is already in the lobby," Elena replied. "I won't be returning to the apartment." She turned to leave. At the door, she paused and looked back at Marcus. He was already checking his phone, likely texting Chloe. "Marcus," she said. He glanced up. "Be careful with the Tokyo deal next week," she said quietly. "The Saitama Group values honor over profit. Don't use the aggressive strategy Arthur drafted. They'll walk away." Marcus rolled his eyes. "I think I know how to run my company, Elena. Goodbye." Elena nodded once, opened the heavy oak door, and walked out. As the door clicked shut, Beatrice let out a sigh of relief. Finally, the trash has taken itself out. "Now, Marcus, call Chloe. We need to secure the venue for the engagement party. The Vanderhovens are expecting a spectacle." Marcus felt a strange knot in his stomach. Usually, he felt relieved when he closed a deal. This felt different. It felt like he had just sold something valuable for pennies, but he couldn't figure out what it was. Elena walked out of the Sterling Tower and into the bustling noise of Fifth Avenue. It was raining, a cold, grey New York drizzle. She didn't have an umbrella. Most women in her position would be hailing a cab to a cheap motel, counting their pennies. Elena walked 2 blocks north, turned a corner, and stopped in front of a blacked-out Range Rover Sentinel that had been idling there for 20 minutes. The rear door opened before she even reached for the handle. A man stepped out. He was massive, standing 6'5", wearing a suit that cost more than Marcus's car. He held a large black umbrella over Elena's head instantly, shielding her from the rain. "Mademoiselle," the man said, his voice a deep rumble with a heavy French accent. "It is done?" "It's done, Pascal," Elena said, sliding into the leather interior of the car. The warmth hit her instantly. It smelled of aged oak and expensive cologne, a scent she hadn't smelled in years. Pascal closed the door and slid into the driver's seat. He looked at her through the rearview mirror. "Does he know?" "He thinks I'm homeless," Elena said, leaning her head back against the seat. She closed her eyes. The facade she had maintained for 5 years was cracking, falling away to reveal the steel beneath. "He thinks I'm going to a shelter." "Lord Thorne is waiting at the private hangar at Teterboro," Pascal said, as he pulled the heavy vehicle into traffic, cutting off a yellow taxi with the aggression of someone who knows they are untouchable. He is displeased. He wanted to come up there himself. "If Julian had gone up there, he would have thrown Marcus out the window," Elena said, a small, tired smile playing on her lips. "I needed to do this myself. I needed to see if Marcus had any redemption left in him, if he had just shown 1 ounce of kindness. Maybe I would have warned him about what's coming." "And?" "He checked his watch," Elena whispered. "He checked his watch while he divorced me." She pulled her phone out. It wasn't the cracked iPhone 11 Marcus allowed her to have. It was a secure satellite device Pascal had handed her. She dialed a number. It rang once. "Eleanor?" The voice on the other end was sharp, commanding, and distinctly British. It was a voice that made prime ministers sit up straighter. "Hello, Julian," she said. "Are you safe? Is Pascal with you?" "I'm safe. I'm en route to Teterboro." "Did you sign?" "Yes. No alimony. No ties. Mutual NDA." A dark chuckle resonated through the phone. "Mutual NDA. You brilliant girl. That means when the news breaks, he can't sue you for defamation, because the truth isn't defamation. And he can't claim he didn't know because he signed the waiver. You just stripped him of his only defense." "I'm tired, Julian," Elena admitted, her voice breaking for the first time. "I just want to go home." "The jet is fueled. The crew is prepped. We're going to Monaco tonight." "But Elena..." Julian paused. "The Sterling Gala is in 2 days. The invitation list includes the governor, the Vanderhovens, and the board of directors." "I know," Elena said, her eyes opening. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, glittering resolve. "And we are going to attend." "As who?" Julian asked, though he already knew the answer. "Elena Vance is dead," she said. "She died in that conference room. It's time for Elena Valois to return." Back in the Sterling Tower, the atmosphere was celebratory but tense. Marcus was trying to work, but he kept hitting roadblocks. He opened his laptop to access the Sterling Asia confidential files, the strategy documents for the Tokyo deal. Access denied. He frowned. He typed the password again. Access denied. "That's weird," he muttered. He picked up the phone and dialed IT. "This is Marcus. Why am I locked out of the Tokyo drive?" "One moment, sir," the technician said. Sir? That drive doesn't exist on our servers." "What do you mean it doesn't exist? I was looking at it yesterday. My wife..." He stopped himself. "Elena used to organize those files." "Sir, according to the logs, those files were hosted on a private external cloud server. The access key was revoked 10 minutes ago. The user account associated with it was AV Consulting." Marcus froze. Elena Vance. "Restore it," Marcus barked. "We can't, sir. It wasn't our server. We never actually owned that data. It looked like we did, but it was being mirrored from an outside source. Whoever owns that source just pulled the plug." Marcus slammed the phone down. "Damn it, Elena!" He assumed she had deleted them out of spite. Petty. He could rewrite them. He was a Sterling. He didn't need her notes. Beatrice walked in, holding a glass of champagne. "Chloe is on her way up. She wants to talk about the floral arrangements for the wedding. She's thinking orchids. Expensive, but worth it." "Not now, Mother," Marcus snapped. Elena messed with the files before she left. Beatrice waved a dismissive hand. "She's just lashing out. Ignore it. Oh, by the way, I just got a call from the event planner for the gala on Saturday. Apparently, A VIP guest just requested a last-minute landing slot for a private jet at the estate's airstrip during the party. Who? Marcus asked, distracted. They wouldn't say. Just that it's a heavy jet. Gulfstream or Bombardier class. Very high profile. Maybe it's the governor? Marcus straightened his tie, his ego inflating instantly. It must be the investors from Dubai. They heard about the divorce and, no, I'm ready to play hardball. Good. Let them land. I want everyone to see how powerful the Sterling family really is. Perfect, Beatrice smiled. I'll make sure the security is ready to welcome them. This gala will be the event of the decade. It would be the event of the decade, certainly, but not for the reasons Beatrice Sterling thought. Teterboro Airport, New Jersey, is where the 1% departs from. But the private hangar Elena arrived at was reserved for the 0.01%. The car pulled up right onto the tarmac. Sitting there, gleaming under the floodlights, was a Gulfstream GL50RR. It wasn't painted in standard white. It was matte black with silver accents. The tail number didn't end in US registration. It was registered in the Cayman Islands. As Pascal opened her door, a man descended the stairs of the jet. Julian Thorne. He was 42, with salt and pepper hair, eyes the color of stormy seas, and a jawline that looked carved from granite. He wore a navy suit, no tie, the top button of his white shirt undone. Julian was a ghost in the financial world. He owned shipping lines, rare earth mines in Africa, and tech firms in Silicon Valley, but you rarely saw his name in Forbes. He preferred power over fame, and he had been in love with Elena Valois since they were teenagers in boarding school in Switzerland. Elena stepped out of the car. Julian didn't wait. He crossed the tarmac in long strides and pulled her into a crushing embrace. He smelled of rain and sandalwood. "I've got you," he whispered into her hair. "I've got you." Eleanor finally let go. The tears she had held back in the lawyer's office soaked into his expensive shirt. "I feel so stupid, Julian. I tried so hard to be normal, to live a simple life." "You fell in love," Julian said, pulling back and cupping her face. "There is no shame in that. But you fell in love with a man who loves himself more than anything else. That is his failure, not yours." "He treated me like a servant," she said, her voice hardening. "His mother treated me like a stray dog." "And on Saturday," Julian said, his eyes darkening with a dangerous promise, "we are going to remind them that stray dogs have wolves for ancestors." They walked up the stairs into the jet. The interior was unlike anything Marcus had ever flown in. Cream leather, gold fixtures, a full bedroom, and a conference area. As the jet taxied to the runway, Elena sat by the window, watching the lights of New York fade away. "Drink?" Julian offered, pouring a glass of vintage Dom Perignon. "Julian," Elena said, ignoring the champagne, "the Tokyo deal. Marcus is going to ruin it." "Let him," Julian said, sitting across from her. "No, you don't understand. If the deal falls through, 3,000 workers in the manufacturing plant in Ohio lose their jobs. Marcus leveraged the pension fund to finance the acquisition. If he fails, he doesn't just lose money. Innocent people lose everything." Julian studied her. Even now, after everything Marcus did, she was worrying about the factory workers. This was why she was the rightful head of the Valois dynasty. "So, what do you want to do?" Julian asked. "I want to buy the debt," Elena said. Julian raised an eyebrow. "You want to buy Sterling Enterprises debt?" "I want to buy the loan Marcus took out for the Tokyo deal. I want to own the note. When he defaults, and he will default without my strategy, I want to be the one holding the leash." Julian smiled. It was a predatory smile. "That will cost you about $300 million. Eleanor reached into a tote bag and pulled out a small velvet pouch. She tipped it over. A ring slid onto the table. It wasn't a wedding ring. It was a signet ring, heavy gold, bearing the crest of a phoenix rising from flames, the Valois crest. "My trust fund unlocks the moment I am divorced," Elena said. "I have access to the family liquidity as of—" She checked her watch. 10 minutes ago. Julian laughed, a genuine, hearty sound. "God, I missed you. Keep your money. I'll buy the debt through a shell company tomorrow morning. Consider it a welcome-back present." "Thank you," she said. "Now," Julian leaned forward, "let's talk about Saturday. The gala. You need a dress. And not just any dress. You need a weapon." Eleanor smiled for the first time in months. A real smile. "I already called Versace. Donatella is meeting us in Monaco." The morning sun over the French Riviera hit the terrace of the Villa Leopolda like a spotlight. It was one of the most expensive private residences in the world, perched on the hills of Villefranche-sur-Mer, overlooking the Mediterranean. Julian Thorne didn't just rent it, he owned it. Elena stood on the balcony, wrapped in a silk robe that cost more than the settlement check Marcus had offered her. The salt air filled her lungs, clearing out the stale, recycled air of the Stirling Tower. For 5 years, she had been suffocating. Today, she could breathe. Inside the grand salon, the atmosphere was frantic but controlled. Racks of clothing lined the walls, Chanel, Dior, McQueen. But the centerpiece was a dress mannequin standing in the middle of the room, attended to by 3 seamstresses and a woman with iconic platinum blonde hair. "Too tight in the waist," Donatella Versace said, her voice raspy and authoritative. "She needs to breathe, but she also needs to destroy him. It is a fine line." Elena stepped back inside. "Donatella, it's beautiful." "It is not just beautiful, Cara," the designer said, turning to face Eleanor. "It is armor. Julian told me the story. This man, this Stirling, he tried to make you invisible, so we make you impossible to miss." Eleanor ran her hand over the fabric. It was a custom creation, a deep, midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the light, embellished with thousands of crushed sapphires along the neckline and a slit that went dangerously high up the thigh. It was elegant, regal, and utterly terrifying. Julian walked in, holding a tablet. He was wearing linen trousers and a white shirt, looking every bit the master of this domain. "The debt acquisition is complete," Julian announced calmly. Elena turned, her eyes wide. "Already?" "It was remarkably easy," Julian said, pouring himself an espresso. "Marcus financed the Tokyo expansion through a high-risk mezzanine loan from a private equity firm in Zurich. The firm was nervous about the rumors of his divorce. They know you were the brains behind the operation. When my shell company, Phoenix Holdings, offered to buy the debt at par value, they practically threw the papers at me." "So, you own him," Elena said, the realization settling in. "Technically, we own him," Julian corrected. "I put the holding company in your name, Elena. You are the creditor. If Marcus misses a single covenant requirement, which he will because he doesn't read the fine print, you have the right to call the loan immediately. That's $300 million due within 24 hours. "He doesn't have the liquidity," Elena whispered. "He spent it all on the Hamptons renovation and the ring for Chloe." "Exactly," Julian smiled. "He would have to liquidate his personal assets, the penthouse, the yacht, the company shares. You hold the axe, Elena. You just have to decide when to swing it." Elena looked at the dress, then at Julian. For years she had felt powerless. Marcus held the credit cards, the house keys, the social calendar. He had made her feel like a guest in her own life. Now, she held the deed to his entire existence. "Not yet," Elena said, her voice steel. "If I call the loan now, it's just business. He'll spin it. He'll say he was a victim of a hostile takeover. I want him to know it was personal. I want him to look me in the eye when his world crumbles." "Then we stick to the plan for the gala," Julian said. "We arrive. We disrupt. We make him panic. And when he makes a mistake, you strike." Later that evening, Elena sat before a vanity mirror while a stylist worked on her hair. She had cut it. The long, sensible brown waves Marcus liked, because they made her look maternal, were gone. Her hair was now a sharp, angled bob, dyed a rich, dark espresso colour. It highlighted her cheekbones and her eyes. She applied a coat of blood-red lipstick. Julian appeared in the doorway, dressed in a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He paused, staring at her. "You look like a queen," he said softly. "I feel like one," Elena replied. She stood up, the midnight blue dress cascading around her. She picked up a necklace from the velvet tray, a choker of diamonds and sapphires that had once belonged to her grandmother, the Countess of Valois. She hadn't worn it since her father's funeral. "Pascal has the jet ready," Julian said, offering her his arm. "It's a 7-hour flight to New York. We land right as the speeches begin." Elena took his arm. Her hand was steady. "Let's go crash a wedding," she said. The Sterling estate in the Hamptons was designed to intimidate. It was a sprawling, 20-acre compound with manicured lawns, a private beach, and a main house that looked like a breathless imitation of Versailles. Tonight, it was lit up like a carnival. 300 guests milled about the lawn. It was the who's who of New York society. Senators, tech moguls, old money families, and eager social climbers. White tents were erected to shield the guests from the wind, filled with towers of seafood, fountains of champagne, and thousands of white orchids, Chloe's demand. Marcus stood near the stage, swirling his scotch. He was already on his third. He should have been happy. He was free. He was rich. He was marrying a Van der Hoven. But he felt a nagging sense of dread. "Smile, darling," Chloe chirped, appearing at his side. She was wearing a pink, ruffled dress that looked like a confectionery explosion. It was loud, expensive, and lacked any subtlety. "The photographer from Vogue is here. We need to look happy." "I am happy," Marcus lied, forcing a grin. "Did you hear?" Chloe whispered loudly. "Arthur told me Elena actually signed the papers. No fight. I told you she was weak. She probably went back to whatever trailer park she crawled out of." Marcus flinched. "She didn't crawl out of a trailer park, Chloe. Oh, stop defending her. She's history. Tonight is about us." Beatrice swept over, looking triumphant in gold lame. "Marcus, the governor is asking for you. And the investors from Dubai are here. They are very impressed with the setup. This engagement is the best PR move you've ever made." "Is the security tight?" Marcus asked, scanning the perimeter. "I don't want any press crashing." "Please," Beatrice scoffed. "We have former Mossad at the gates. A mouse couldn't get in without an invite." At that moment, a low rumble began to vibrate through the ground. It started as a hum, then grew into a roar that drowned out the string quartet playing Vivaldi. The guests looked up, shielding their eyes against the setting sun. "What is that?" Chloe shrieked, clutching her pearls. A shadow swept over the party. A massive Gulfstream G650OR, painted matte black with silver wingtips, was coming in low. Dangerously low. It roared over the estate at barely 500 feet, the engine screaming with raw power. The wind from its wake rattled the champagne glasses and sent napkins flying. "What the hell is that pilot doing?" Marcus shouted, spilling his drink. The jet banked sharply, heading toward the private airstrip that bordered the Sterling estate, an airstrip Marcus rarely used because his own jet was too small to require it. "That's a heavy jet," a man next to Marcus muttered. He was an aviation enthusiast. "That's a $65 million bird. Who do you know with that kind of hardware, Marcus?" Marcus didn't answer. He watched as the jet touched down on the private strip, a mile away, but clearly visible across the flat expanse of the lawn. The party had stopped. The speeches were forgotten. All eyes were on the sleek, black machine, taxiing to a halt at the edge of the property, right where the private access road met the party grounds. "Ignore it," Beatrice commanded, trying to regain control. "Probably just a rude late arrival. Orchestra, keep playing." But nobody was listening to the orchestra. A convoy of 3 black SUVs, which had been waiting at the perimeter, raced toward the jet. The stairs of the plane lowered. A few moments later, the SUVs drove back toward the party entrance. The security guards at the gate stepped forward to stop them, but the lead SUV didn't slow down. The window rolled down and a badge was flashed. The gates opened. "Who is that?" Chloe whined. "They are ruining my entrance." The SUVs pulled up right to the edge of the red carpet. The music died down completely. The silence was heavy, filled only with the sound of the ocean and the idling engines. The driver of the lead car stepped out. Pascal. He looked even more imposing in a tuxedo. He walked around to the rear passenger door and opened it. First, a cane emerged, a sleek black cane with a silver handle shaped like a wolf's head. Then, Julian Thorne stepped out. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Julian was a legend, a myth. He never attended social events. He was the man who ate competitors for breakfast. "Is that Julian Thorne?" the governor whispered to his aide. "I've been trying to get a meeting with him for 2 years." Julian stood by the door and held out his hand. A woman's leg appeared. A stiletto heel clicked onto the pavement. Elena rose from the car. The silence broke. 100 whispers erupted at once. "Is that— No, it can't be. Look at that dress. Is that Elena Sterling?" She stood tall, the midnight blue velvet hugging her curves, the sapphires catching the floodlights like stars. Her dark bob was sharp, her red lips curved in a mysterious, unbothered smile. She didn't look like the woman who had organized charity bake sales. She looked like a deity of vengeance. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. He dropped his glass. It shattered on the stone patio, but the sound was lost in the commotion. "Elena?" he choked out. Beatrice marched forward, her face turning a violent shade of red. "This is a private event. Security, remove this trespasser." 2 security guards hesitated, then stepped toward Elena. Pascal stepped in front of them, crossing his massive arms. He didn't say a word. He just stared. The guards stopped, sensing that moving forward would result in immediate bodily harm. Elena gently placed a hand on Pascal's arm to lower it. She looked past the guards, past Beatrice, locking eyes directly with Marcus. "Beatrice," Elena said, her voice projecting clearly across the silent lawn. "There is no need for a scene. We aren't crashing." She reached into a small, diamond-encrusted clutch and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. "We received an invitation," she said, holding it up, "addressed to the occupant of the penthouse. Since the deed to the penthouse hasn't technically cleared the county clerk's office until Monday. I believe that is still me." It was a technicality, a loophole. Beatrice had sent mass invites to all their properties for the staff to distribute, never thinking Eleanor would get one. Julian stepped up beside her, placing a possessive hand on the small of her back. He looked at the crowd, his eyes cold and amused. "Good evening," Julian said, his voice smooth and rich. "I hope we aren't late. Elena was insisting we stop in Monaco to pick up something suitable to wear." You know how she is about standards. The governor pushed past Marcus. Julian Thorne. My goodness, what a surprise. Governor. Julian nodded, shaking the man's hand, but keeping his focus on Eleanor. Have you met my partner? I believe you know Elena, but perhaps not this version of her. The crowd parted as Elena and Julian walked up the red carpet. They didn't walk like guests. They walked like they owned the ground beneath their feet. Marcus stood frozen. Chloe was tugging at his arm, hissing, "Do something! She's wearing Versace! That's my designer!" Elena stopped 3 feet from Marcus. She smelled of expensive perfume and ozone. She looked him up and down, her expression one of mild amusement, as if looking at a child who had spilled milk. "Hello, Marcus," she said. "Lovely party. The orchids are a bit excessive, don't you think? But then again, subtlety was never your strong suit." "What are you doing here?" Marcus hissed, his voice trembling. "I paid you to leave." Elena leaned in close, so only he could hear. "You paid Elena Vance to leave, Marcus. She's gone. You're dealing with Elena Valois now, and you really should have checked who bought your Tokyo debt this morning." She pulled back, winked, and walked past him toward the bar, Julian at her side. Marcus felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. He pulled it out with shaking hands. It was a text from his CFO. "Alert. Change of ownership in the mezzanine loan. New creditor is Phoenix Holdings. They just flagged a covenant breach. They are calling the full amount, $300 meter, due tomorrow." Marcus looked up at Elena, who was laughing at something the governor said, a glass of champagne in her hand. The trap hadn't just sprung. It had snapped his neck. The engagement party had transformed from a coronation into a wake. The string quartet was still playing a cheerful waltz, but the tension on the lawn was thick enough to choke on. Marcus Sterling stood near the ice sculpture of a swan, his phone clutching his ear like a lifeline. He was sweating, despite the cool ocean breeze. On the other end of the line was his chief financial officer, a man who usually spoke in calm, measured tones, now sounding like he was on the verge of a panic attack. "What do you mean, immediate repayment?" Marcus hissed, turning his back to the guests. "It's a 30-year loan." "It was a 30-year loan, sir," the CFO stammered. "But there's a change of control clause and a material adverse change clause in the fine print. The new creditor, Phoenix Holdings, invoked them. They claim your divorce settlement significantly altered your liquidity ratios. They've frozen the operating accounts, Marcus. We can't make payroll on Friday." Marcus looked across the lawn. Elena was holding court near the Raw bar. She was laughing softly at something the governor said, her hand resting lightly on Julian Thorne's arm. She looked radiant, powerful, and completely untouchable. He hung up the phone and marched toward her. He didn't care about the guests anymore. He didn't care about the optics. He was a drowning man, and she was the ocean. "Elena!" he barked, interrupting the governor. The circle of high society elites fell silent. Julian turned slowly, his expression one of bored irritation, like a lion disturbed by a fly. "Marcus," Elena said, her voice cool and pleasant. "I believe you're interrupting the governor." "I don't care," Marcus snapped, his face flushed. "We need to talk. Now. In private." "I have nothing to say to you in private, Marcus," Elena replied, taking a sip of her champagne. "My lawyer, Arthur, made that very clear. Or rather, your lawyer did." "You bought the debt," Marcus accused, his voice rising. "You used some shell company to buy the Tokyo loan. That's insider trading. That's fraud." "Actually," Julian interjected smoothly, "it's perfectly legal distressed asset acquisition. Elena simply saw a bad investment and decided to correct it." "You're trying to bankrupt me," Marcus shouted. The music stopped. Every head turned. Chloe Vanderhoven, sensing the shift in power, took a subtle step away from her fiancé. Elena handed her glass to a passing waiter. She stepped forward, the midnight blue velvet of her dress swirling around her legs. She didn't look up at Marcus. She looked through him. "I am not trying to bankrupt you, Marcus. You did that yourself," she said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. "You leveraged the company to the hilt to buy a yacht you didn't need and a ring for a woman who doesn't love you. You fired the 3 most senior engineers in the Ohio plant to cut costs, ruining the product quality. You ignored the cultural protocols of the Saitama Group, insulting them to their faces." She paused, her eyes flashing. "I didn't buy the debt to destroy the company. I bought it to save it from you." Beatrice Sterling pushed through the crowd, her face a mask of fury. "How dare you, you ungrateful little gutter rat! After everything we gave you, security, get her out of here." She raised her hand to strike Elena. It was a desperate, classless move, but the hand never connected. Pascal moved faster than a man his size should be able to. He caught Beatrice's wrist in midair, holding it with a grip of iron. He didn't squeeze, but he didn't let go. "I would not recommend that, madam," Pascal rumbled. Elena looked at her former mother-in-law with pity. "Let her go, Pascal. She's not a threat. She's just a relic." Pascal released Beatrice, who stumbled back, gasping in indignation. Elena turned back to Marcus. "Here is the situation, Marcus. Phoenix Holdings officially owns the note. You have defaulted. As of tomorrow morning, I am exercising my right to convert the debt into equity." Marcus's eyes widened in horror. "Equity? You can't—" "Read the contract," Elena said. "In the event of a default, the creditor has the option to seize controlling shares equivalent to the debt value. Since you owe $300 million and the company's stock has plummeted 20% since news of your erratic behavior leaked, that gives me 51%. The math hit him like a physical blow. 51%. "You're taking my company," he whispered. "I'm taking my company," Elena corrected. "The company I built while you were playing golf. The company I saved while you were cheating." She turned to the crowd. "I apologize for the disruption, everyone. Please enjoy the party. I believe the bar is still open, though I can't promise the host can pay the tab." She turned to leave, Julian guiding her. But the final knife twist came from Chloe. The blonde socialite looked at Marcus, then at the frantic text messages on her own phone from her father, warning her to distance herself from the Sterling crash. "Marcus," Chloe said, her voice shrill. "Is this true? Are you broke?" "Chloe, it's just a setback. I can fix it," Marcus pleaded, reaching for her. "Don't touch me," she recoiled. She pulled the massive diamond ring off her finger, the ring bought with the company's liquidity, and threw it at his chest. "I am not marrying a failure. My father warned me about you." Chloe stormed off toward the valet stand. Marcus stood alone in the center of the lawn. His mother was weeping. His fiancée was gone. His company was gone. And the woman he had discarded like trash was walking toward a $65 million jet, hand in hand with a better man. Elena didn't look back. She didn't need to. The morning edition of the Wall Street Journal sat in the center of the glass conference table. The headline was bold, unforgiving, and impossible to ignore. The silent coup, how socialite Elena Valois toppled the Sterling Empire in 21 days. The article detailed everything. It tracked the secret acquisition of the Tokyo debt. It analyzed the change of control clauses that had triggered the default. It even had a sidebar speculating on the romance between the mysterious heiress and the reclusive billionaire Julian Thorne. But inside the boardroom on the 42nd floor of the Sterling Tower, the mood wasn't sensational. It was funereal. Marcus Sterling sat at the far end of the table. 3 weeks ago, he had been the king of New York. He had a fiancée, a 9-figure net worth, and a mother who controlled the social registry. Today, he was alone. He looked terrible. The charcoal Tom Ford suit he wore was the same one he'd worn yesterday. His tie was loosened, his eyes rimmed with red. He hadn't slept since the night of the gala. His phone, usually buzzing with deal offers and party invites, had been silent for days, except for calls from creditors. Beatrice, his mother, had fled to her sister's villa in Tuscany the moment the credit card stopped working, leaving Marcus to face the firing squad alone. The heavy oak doors opened. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The air, previously stale and heavy with defeat, seemed to charge with electricity. Eleanor walked in. She wasn't wearing the soft beige sweaters of her marriage. She was wearing a structured white power suit by Alexander McQueen, tailored to razor-sharp perfection. Her dark hair was slicked back, revealing the diamond studs in her ears. She didn't look like a woman who had been divorced. She looked like a CEO who had just finished a merger. To her right walked Julian Thorne. He wore a navy suit, unbuttoned at the collar, radiating a calm, predatory confidence. To her left walked Arthur Penhaligon. Marcus flinched when he saw Arthur, his own lawyer, the man who had drafted the insulting $50,000 settlement. "Arthur?" Marcus croaked, his voice cracking. "You're representing her?" Arthur didn't even look at Marcus. He pulled out a chair for Eleanor. "I represent the majority shareholder, Marcus. My allegiance is to the company, and as of 8 a.m. this morning, that is Ms. Valois." Eleanor sat at the head of the table, Marcus's old seat. She placed her hands on the mahogany surface, the same table where she had signed her life away less than a month ago. "Good morning, Marcus," she said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was the voice of a surgeon about to make an incision. "You can't do this," Marcus whispered, though he knew she already had. "The board won't approve it." "The board has already approved it," Julian said, taking the seat next to Eleanor. He slid a thick dossier across the polished wood. "We held an emergency vote at 6 a.m. Since Phoenix Holdings converted the debt into equity, Elena now controls 51% of the voting stock. The board serves her now." Marcus stared at the dossier. "So that's it? You're just going to fire me from my own company?" "No," Elena said. "I'm not firing you." Marcus looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "I'm erasing you," she finished. She opened the folder in front of her. "We are rebranding. Sterling Enterprises is a damaged name. The market associates it with volatility, poor judgment, and failed engagements. As of noon today, the tickers on the NYSE will change to Valois Global. Your name is coming off the building, Marcus. It's coming off the letterhead. It's coming off the trust." "Elena, please." Marcus leaned forward, desperation seeping into his tone. "I built this." "No." Elena corrected him sharply. "Your grandfather built it. You inherited it. And I saved it." She picked up a document. "Let's review the state of things. When I took over the books 3 weeks ago, the company was hemorrhaging cash. You had leveraged the pension fund to pay for the Hamptons renovation. You had alienated the Saitama Group in Tokyo. You were days away from a federal investigation for misuse of funds." She paused, letting the weight of his failures settle in the room. "In the last 20 days, I have rehired the engineers you fired. I have personally apologized to the Saitama representatives. In fluent Japanese, by the way, a language I learned while you were out partying. They have re-signed the contract. The stock price has rebounded 12% since the announcement that I was taking the helm." Marcus slumped back in his chair. He looked small. The arrogance that had defined him for years had evaporated, leaving behind a frightened boy. "What happens to me?" he asked. "That depends on the next 5 minutes," Elena said. She signaled to Arthur. The lawyer slid a single sheet of paper toward Marcus. "You still hold 12% of the B shares," Elena explained. "They are non-voting, but they exist. I don't want you on my cap table, Marcus. I want a clean break." "This is a buyout offer," Arthur stated professionally. Marcus looked at the number. His eyes widened. 10 million. The stake is worth 100 million on paper. "On paper," Julian interjected smoothly. "But if you don't sell, we will dilute your shares. We will issue new stock options for the employees. By Christmas, your 12% will be worth less than the ink on that page. Plus, we know about your personal debts. The engagement ring? The yacht down payment? You owe the banks 15 million personally. You're underwater, Marcus." It was a checkmate, a brutal, inescapable checkmate. "If you sign," Elena said, "you get 10 million. Enough to pay off the banks, keep the penthouse and disappear. You can live a quiet life. You can go to Europe. You can do whatever you want, as long as it isn't here." Marcus picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly the tip tapped against the paper. He looked at Eleanor one last time. He searched her face for the woman he had married, the woman who made him tea when he was sick, the woman who listened to his rants about his mother. "Elle," he whispered, using her old nickname. "Did you ever really love me? Or was this whole marriage just a long con? Were you always this wolf?" Elena's expression softened, just for a fraction of a second. The steel facade cracked, revealing the human beneath. "I loved you more than I loved myself, Marcus," she said softly. "I signed that prenup 5 years ago with a smile. I worked in the shadows for you. I took your mother's abuse. I made myself small so you could feel big." She leaned forward, her eyes hardening into diamonds. "But you didn't want a partner. You wanted a fan. And when you got bored, you tried to throw me away like a used napkin. You forgot the most dangerous thing about me, Marcus." "What?" "I'm a Valois," she said. "We don't break. We burn and then we rise." Marcus looked down. He signed the paper. Marcus Sterling. It was over. He stood up, leaving the check on the table for Arthur to process. He walked to the door, his footsteps echoing in the large, silent room. He paused at the threshold, looking back at the view of the city he once thought he owned. Then he walked out, closing the door on his legacy. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't oppressive. It was the silence of a battlefield after the war is won. "Well," Julian said, breaking the tension. He stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. "That went better than I expected." I thought he might cry. "He wanted to," Elena said, letting out a long breath she felt like she had been holding for 5 years. She slumped slightly in the chair, the adrenaline fading. Arthur stood up, buttoning his jacket. "I'll file the transfer papers with the SEC immediately, Ms. Valois. Congratulations. You officially own the controlling interest." "Thank you, Arthur," Elena said. "And Arthur?" "Yes. Draft a bonus for the Ohio engineers. They stuck with us through the uncertainty. I want them to know loyalty is rewarded here." Arthur smiled. A genuine smile, rare for him. "I'll see to it." He left the room. Elena stood up and walked to the window, standing next to Julian. The city looked different from here. Before, It had looked like a cage of glass and steel. Now, it looked like a puzzle she had finally solved. Julian turned to her. He didn't touch her. Not yet. He just looked at her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "You were magnificent," he said. "I was terrified," she admitted. For a second, when he looked at me, I felt like the waitress again. I felt like I didn't belong here. Julian reached out and took her hand. He ran his thumb over her knuckles. "You didn't take this company because of your name, Elena. You took it because you were the only one in that room smart enough to run it. You belong here. You always have." Eleanor looked at him. Julian, the man who had waited, the man who had handed her the weapon but let her swing it herself. "So," she said, a small smile playing on her lips, "I am currently the CEO of a multinational conglomerate. My calendar is open for the next 48 hours. What do billionaires do on their days off?" Julian checked his watch, a vintage Rolex, understated and timeless. "Well, the Gulfstream is fueled and waiting at Teterboro. The flight plan is filed for the Amalfi Coast. I believe the Hotel Le Sirenuse in Positano has the best terrace for watching the sunset. And I promised you a real honeymoon." "A honeymoon?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "We aren't married, Julian." Julian reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a ring box. Not yet. That was for Positano. Instead, he pulled out 2 passports. "Not yet," he smiled. "But a man can dream. Shall we?" Elena took the passport. She looked around the boardroom one last time. She saw the ghost of the girl she used to be, sitting in the corner, scared and silent. She mentally waved goodbye to her. "Let's go," she said. They walked out of the office, hand in hand. They walked past the reception desk where a maintenance worker was already unscrewing the brass letters of Sterling Enterprises from the wall. Elena didn't look back. She walked into the elevator, the doors closing on her past, and hit the button for the lobby. The descent wasn't a fall. It was a launch. As they stepped out onto the busy street of Fifth Avenue, the paparazzi were waiting. Cameras flashed. Questions were shouted. "Elena! Elena! Is it true you own the company? Mr. Thorne, are you two together? What did you say to Marcus?" Elena stopped. She put on her sunglasses. She looked at the camera, flashed a mysterious, triumphant smile that would grace the cover of magazines for months to come, and stepped into the waiting car. She had signed the divorce quietly, but she had made her return louder than thunder. And that, my friends, is how Elena Valois turned a signature on a divorce paper into the ultimate checkmate. She proved that silence isn't weakness, it's preparation. Marcus Sterling thought he was discarding a broken woman, but he was actually releasing a titan who would return to conquer his empire. This story reminds us that your value isn't defined by how others treat you, but by what you know you are worth. Marcus bet against her, but he forgot the golden rule. Never underestimate the person who helped you build your throne. If you enjoyed this saga of revenge, high-stakes business, and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode of Billionaire Diaries. I want to hear from you. Do you think Marcus deserved the 10 million, or should Elena have left him with nothing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.